All right, now back to this trio right here. What an unbelievable trio this is. Rorion Gracie, Rener Gracie, Rorion Gracie, and this is unbelievable. I don't even know what to say. We end on this note. It's a great way to end the 19th anniversary show of the UFC. And by the way, Rener, happy birthday to you. I know you just turned 29 on Saturday.
Thank you, bro. Just trying to keep it real on the highest level, and just coincidentally, it's happened to coincide with our first attempt at Movember. As you know, we're supporting the the Movember organization, so that's why you see these small little caterpillar-like things above our lips. So you can see Hidon's here first. White belt mustaches. See mine? I'm trying to keep it real. I'm trying to make mine look like his one day. Look.
That is a sweet mustache.
I'm aiming for my grandfather's, the nice slick one. And my dad also is keeping it real as well back there. But he's the grandmaster of the mustache, so he doesn't get to show his up close.
Yeah, he was rocking the... Yeah, Rorion, you were rocking the mustache in 1993. I mean, that was one of the best mustaches of all time.
Great.
Don Fry's mustache bows down to your mustache. So, okay, I want to start with, as you mentioned, the father figure, the man who came up with this idea. We had Art Davie at the beginning of the show, and he told us about this Playboy article that he read that talked about you in 1989 and what you were doing in California. Do you recall meeting Art? And he said that, a lot of people came up to you with these ideas, pitched you these things, and they kind of just went through one ear, out the other. You stopped listening. Why did you believe that this guy, Art Davie, along with you, could really create something that turned into the UFC?
Well, Art is a real amazing salesman. And I actually remember meeting him. He walked in the academy one day, and then we were still finishing up the touches on the new building on Carson Street at the time. And he came in, started talking about this good sales pitch and stuff like that. And started talking about, the whole idea of marketing in general. We had not talked about UFC at that time. He first became a student for a few months, watched some of the challenge matches we had at the academy. And, after some of those challenge matches, I started telling him that, this is amazing. He was blown away by the opportunity to see real fights. And then we started discussing the possibility of sharing that kind of activity with the rest of the world. And that's when we one day went into the office and started bouncing ideas and scratching our heads and how are we going to do this? He said, well, if you want to go big time, you got to go television. And I said, well, let's go television then. And we put together the concept. We wrote a business plan, took it to New York, to Bob Meyerowitz at Semaphore. And I got a whole bunch of students together one day, and we raised the funds to make the show happen. And we never looked back. The rest is history. Royce went in there, did his part, and we're here today.
You make it sound easy, though, but apparently it wasn't very easy. HBO, Showtime, all these people were turning you down.
Yes.
We
had to choose Colorado because Colorado was one of the 6 states at the time that would allow bare-knuckle fighting. There was a time on the early days, as you recall, there was no gloves, there was no time limits, there's no points, no judges, no rules. It was pretty wild. And so we have to be very careful in choosing that, but eventually everything worked out fine. And again, Art's commitment and my, vision sharing with him, make the thing happen. It was great, and it was exciting times.
How did you convince them to take you up on this offer? How did you convince them to jump on board? Do you remember?
Convince who?
SEG, because everyone said no to you. Why did they say yes?
I got clips of some real fights that we had in Brazil. I took a plane to New York, and I sat with a whole bunch of suits in New York. I said, check this out. And I rolled the VHS, and they went absolutely crazy. When the blood started spilling, and the guys are just going headbutts to each other's face and stuff, he said, we got to do this. Everybody on this office went crazy. And I said, well, let's make it happen. That's, a picture's worth 1,000 words.
That is true. Now, Rorion, in November of 1993, you were about to turn 11 years old, right? Do you remember, the days and the weeks leading up to this as your father is about to embark on this unbelievable journey and put on this show? Do you remember what it was like in the household?
I just remember him, of course, being always at the office that they created for the UFC. WOW, correct?
Yes.
WOW Promotions. I remember an office where there was actually applications and photos being sent by people around the world to try to fight. And I remember actually looking with Art Davie through some photos, and he would pull up somebody like, this is Pat Smith, and this is, I think it was Gerard Gordeau, and he was pulling out names and showing me pictures and how, how bad these guys were and where they were from. So that was my youngest memory of photos and stuff.
And then tell them what your job was in the first UFC.
Of course, my job, Ariel knows very well, cleaning the mats. But that before, leading up to it, was almost the selecting process of the fighters. And I remember even UFC 3, when Chemo came around, again, Wow Promotions, and this guy Chemo was like the most amazing. Art was never so excited as when he saw Chemo, I remember. So you cleaning the mats.
You were part of that selection process? Like, you remember them going through it?
Well, I remember them looking at pictures, and they were already pretty much telling me, we got this guy right here. He's great. They weren't asking my opinion. Then I had no idea. But they were just explaining how bad each guy was and showing me pictures of different people, and probably some who never even fought. But for sure, I remember seeing Chemo's picture, Gerard Godot, and I remember seeing Pat Smith's picture.
And
Art Jemmers, maybe. And then, of course, me cleaning the mats was just the most ridiculous thing. Between each round, walking out there and wiping the blood off the mats between fights, that was the crazy part. Is I almost want to do that for a UFC right now, but I don't know if they even do that anymore. Do they clean the blood or just dries up?
Well,
just dries up.
Exactly. Well, actually, for the Fox events, they have this guy come in with like this gun, and he sprays things, almost like painting over it, but they don't have anyone cleaning the mat. Got it. Now, we'll get back to the mats in a second, but I see Rener there, and I could see he wants to explode because I haven't asked him a question yet, and he wants to go on. I know he wants to just drop some knowledge on us. How much did it crush you, Rener? As what? I guess if this is the 19th anniversary, as a 10-year-old, how much did it crush you that you weren't invited to go to this event?
It was pretty bad. I mean, it was one of the lows of my life to turn 10 years old and to know, and all the excitement going into it, it was all going to go down. Everyone's ready. Everyone's packing their bags, including me. And then it was like, no, Rener, you're not going. So they take off on the plane, and I get to watch it on TV. And I was upset, but I was never more upset than when I saw him and my cousin Hawkstone cleaning the blood in the match, in between fights, in there keeping it real. I thought, man, this is I will never forgive my father for this one.
See, that's what happens when you're 12 years old. You get hooked up in this family.
No, but I got to go to UFC 2 and then the ones thereafter, and it was an incredible experience, to say the least.
But what was your birthday party like? Because your birthday party was 2 days before, so I'd imagine your father wasn't there, your brother wasn't there. They were already in Denver, right?
Yeah, no, it was just, just the rest of the family that stayed at home, extended family, relatives that were over to watch the fight, and all those people, and we just had some watermelon juice and kept it real on the highest level.
And so, Rorion, let's find out right now, why didn't you bring Rener there? I mean, this is obviously a sore subject that still bothers him today. Why did you think he wasn't ready for the UFC?
Well, one has to do what one has to do. Sometimes decisions you have to chop the hammer, and that's what it is.
Do you regret that decision?
No, it's okay. It's good for him to stay at home, so Hero has something to tell about.
And let me have my trip, you know what I'm saying? Give me a trip to myself.
And that must have been great as the older brother getting to be in there and experience it, and the younger brother is back home crying, right?
Well, no, I didn't even remember him. When I got to the UFC, all that mattered was that I was with so many relatives and so many uncles and everybody, brothers, cousins, friends, black belts, just who's who in the jiu-jitsu world. Everybody's just hanging out in hotel ballrooms. You know the drill. It's the same as today, except for back then it was more time before the event. I think we would even go a little earlier, probably 5 days before. So it's just a big party leading up to the fight.
And Rorion, a lot of people have said that the UFC was created to be an infomercial for the Gracie family. Do you agree with that?
Well, I, of course, had always a lot of faith in jiu-jitsu, and because I've had the opportunity to see jiu-jitsu against different styles of martial art. I don't know if it's an infomercial, but it worked out really good for us. It's what I hoped it would happen, did happen. How's that?
Did you think that it was going to last, 2, 3, 4? Forget about UFC 154, which comes up this weekend. But in your mind, when you were making this, were you like, okay, this is going to be a one-time thing. We're going to show how dominant it is and then kind of move on?
No, I knew it was going to be an ongoing process because the concept of the show was to bring new challenges all the time. There's enough different styles of martial arts going on. It does not surprise me that it has gotten as big as it did either. However, I must admit that the way it took on today is a completely new animal, it's a new show, entertainment. And as far as the rules are not being the same anymore, I understand that because the whole world decided to embrace the concept of learning Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And one way or the other, everybody who steps on the mat today must know Jiu-Jitsu, which was my goal in coming to this country to begin with. So I'm very happy the way it turned out.
And for Rener, I mean, what's it like being at that time? I remember I was in 1993, so that, I mean, that was what, 11 years old. I was 11 years old in 1993, so around your age. Everyone knew I remember watching it at my grandfather's house. Everyone knew the Gracie name. It started to become like Michael Jordan. Gracie was, you know, the Babe Ruth of this whatever sport it was, Ultimate Fighting. What was it like growing up with that last name?
Man, it was really cool, you know. And yeah, you know, here in Southern California, everyone knew. And you know, put it this way, it helped out with the bullies. You know what I'm saying? Once they found out my last name, and it kind of settled things real quickly. And you know, even teachers at our school, when we were going through middle school and high school, they're like, "Oh, Gracie family," so they have respect and they're, you know, fans of what went on in there. And it's always funny to hear. And every time I meet a new person who knows the family name or remembers it from, you know, the early UFC days, especially UFC 1, it's always fascinating to hear their recollection of UFC 1, the other people's. I knew Royce was going to win because I had seen him win for the, you know, 10 years before that in the Gracie garage in all the challenge matches we had there. So it wasn't really a mystery to us as it was to the other artists. But for all the fans out there who see this little, you know, pretty Brazilian guy going there at 178 pounds, fighting the likes of Ken Shamrock and, you know, Gerard Gordeau or whoever else, you can imagine what's going through their mind because, you know, mathematically, Royce was supposed to lose, right? So everyone watched that and felt sorry for him. There are people who tell me, like, yeah, this guy, not only do you think he's going to lose, but you don't want him to be in the cage. You want him to get out quickly before he gets killed. And to hear people tell those stories, and then it's always funny when they have one story and they say, yeah, when I watched it the first time, I thought he was going to lose, but he won 3 times in one night. Then on UFC 2, when I brought my friends over to watch, my friends felt the same sympathy for Royce, but I warned them. I said, watch, that little Brazilian guy, he's like a snake. He'll be choking him out in 2 minutes. And they would always win bets like that. And, you know, it's really funny to hear, you know, kind of what has happened. And I think, you know, overall, when you talk about UFC 1, it's the beginning of a new era. I think that jiu-jitsu, you know, of course, came in, but there was ground fighting going on, and there was grappling arts, and there were submissions going on in America before then. I think that the most unique thing that the initial UFCs did for martial arts is it effectively changed the distances at which fights were fought. Because up until that point, if you think back on the martial arts scene in America, what was it? It was the, you know, the high-flying punches and kicks, the Bruce Lee era, where everyone was about the prettiest punch, the prettiest back-spinning kick, and that's what it was all about. And if you had like a taekwondo or a karate, and they would compete against each other, people would stand there at an agreed upon, or boxing, Western boxing, they would stand there at a distance, they would accept this distance, and they would hit each other until someone got the perfect hit, and then they would go down. What jiu-jitsu and kind of the Gracie family and the previous generation, my dad and my uncles, are responsible for is essentially changing the distance at which fights were fought. They would say, wait, let's not stand here and go toe-to-toe and risk getting knocked out. Let's just grab the guy, make him flop, exhaust, demoralize himself, and then choke him out. So there was no longer this idea that you had to stand in front of someone and trade until the knockout took place. And I think that's what's the biggest contribution, I think, is it changed really what a real fight is and what martial arts is all about.
That is a fantastic, fascinating breakdown of the legacy of the UFC. We thank you for that. Ryron, I want to ask you, backstage, do you remember what it was like walking around and seeing these characters like Taylor Tooley and Ken Shamrock? Do you remember what the scene was like that night at McNichol Sports Arena?
Yeah, I remember walking around collecting autographs from any fighter I could. It was a little bit, you could say, not right. Like, here's my uncle's fighting, and I'm out there like fans of Taylor Tooley and getting Gerard Gordeau's autograph before Royce fights him. But, you know, that's what happens when you're 12. You just want everybody's autograph. And that poster right now that I had is way gone. But I do remember seeing them. And even though they were all much bigger and heavier and stronger, I was a little bit nervous, of course, for Royce. But when I really would just stop and sit down, it was like, man, after watching the first fight, which was Taylor Tooley's fight, right?
Yeah.
Getting kicked in the face. I saw that fight. I'm like, man, Royce is going to be okay.
I actually was watching that fight last night, and there's a point where Taylor Tooley, he's all bloodied up. His tooth just flew out of his mouth. And Rorion, you come over the cage, and you're talking to the doctors, and you're making sure if he's okay, and then you decide ultimately that he can't continue. And the announcers were actually saying that he should continue, that it's a mistake to stop the fight. What were you thinking when this happened? This fight lasted 26 seconds. Did you think, uh-oh, I mean, if this is going to last this short like this, I mean, maybe this is not going to go as planned?
No, I actually...
Keep going.
What happened is this. when the guy got kicked and the fight was interrupted, my feeling was, wait a minute, don't stop the fight. Let him go. That's what I was telling the referee. And unfortunately, the doctor, not unfortunately, but the doctor came in and said that the eye was cut and there will be a liability to his vision if he continued fighting. And that's when I was asking his cornerman, would you like him to continue or you want to pull the plug on this fight? And that's what the whole argument was at the time. And the guy said, I want to risk his eye. I want to pull the plug, take him out, stop the fight. I said, okay, let's do that then. That was basically the essence of the argument at that point.
What was your job fight night? I saw you cage side there. You had the mustache. You looked fantastic, the nice suit. But what was your job?
Well, I was a fight director, choosing the whole thing. But at that moment, I was just going to hang out and make sure that everything was running smoothly and everything was in place and then just enjoy the night. It was an exciting night. And I knew that once I walked into the UFC that night, before the show started, it looks very nice. The octagon visual was something extremely exciting. Nobody has seen anything like that before, like a cage, the whole animal concept of people walking in. 2 men walk in, 1 man walk out is exactly what we hoped for. And it turned out to be really exciting. And I knew history would be made that night for sure.
Do you remember
when Royce won, giving every little man hope, the fact that he was so small in comparison to everybody else? It was a message that we want to put across for Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and we're all very fortunate with that.
Do you remember what it was like after the event with the family there? Royce had won. The event was a success. Do you remember what that feeling was, how you all celebrated?
Totally euphoria for all of us. It was like celebrating not only an exciting event, but the fact that Royce came out on top and the Gracie name, was upheld in its effectiveness, and the examples and the techniques developed by the old man were well represented in showing the world that can be done and accessible by everyone. If Royce can do it, anybody can do it. That was the message.
Henry, you watched it on TV, right? They let you stay up?
Oh, yeah, they let me stay up. I watched it. And what I thought was really cool was that my grandfather was alive to see this. That's a huge deal because without him, none of this would have happened. And he's, he was like maybe early 80s, about that time, 19 years ago? Yeah, just about 80 years old. For him to be around, to have seen, kind of the global dissemination, exposure, and more than anything, see Royce go in there with his techniques and being the smaller guy and win on television all over the world. To be totally honest, I don't even think he knew to what degree this would have an impact globally. And, I'm just glad that he was there. And it was really cool how, if you recall, they gave an award to my grandfather before the final match, I think it was.
Yes.
They had a plaque for him and they recognized him.
The first Ultimate Fighter.
The first Ultimate Fighter, which was perfect, and for him to have been able to come over and see that and be part of that after so many, to think where it all came from him being a 13, 14-year-old boy who has, mental problems, physical problems that he cannot do any sportive activity, to making Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, to then fighting and putting his own neck on the line, and then to see that get to America, get on TV so that all martial artists can see it all over the world. I think it was a very cool full circle. And you can tell because he was very touched by the recognition and by the event as a whole. And for Royce to win, I think was just, the icing on the cake for sure.
And for me, it was extremely important as well because I remember maybe 20, 30 years before that, I saw a major actor in the United States receive the Oscars on television in Brazil. And I thought to myself then, 20 years prior to that, how come my father does not get an Oscar for everything he's accomplished? And then eventually being able to come to America, go through the kind of struggles we went through here in the early days, and eventually creating UFC and give a fighting Oscar, kind of, one could say, to the old man, which is that plaque that Rener's talking about here. It was my way of paying respect to the old man, and I think he was very proud of that. So it meant a lot to all of us.
And one of the great images, Rorion, of that first event was the Gracie Train that, Royce was a part of and your family coming out to the cage. What is the symbolism behind that? Where did that come from?
Oh, the idea was to support. If you put one next to each other, it would be crazy. It would be difficult to walk across the crowd. So putting one in line with each other like that, I think Hiro was the first one in line, right, Hiro?
No, in UFC.
UFC one?
Two or three.
Yes. And eventually, the idea was just, letting support and the vibes and touching each other, just pushing through. It was that kind of thing. One after the other, one backing the other one up, and that kind of thing.
And Ryron, I want to go back to the blood here for a second, because you're a pretty young kid to go in there and start cleaning blood. How did you even get that job?
That was, I got the job
for me.
By my dad. Yeah, I got hired.
I hired him.
I worked for free.
You work for free?
It was very, it wasn't even too bloody, it was just a little bit of blood. But I think I got fired, right? The next year I couldn't come back. Too many moms complained.
That's right. A lot of controversy to have little kids wiping blood off the mat. You know, a lot of moms went crazy with that. And, you know, we only did one time, and Hero made history again. That was it.
Only if these moms knew, you know, who my grandfather was and who my father was and where I was raised and what I was watching when I was 7 years old, they wouldn't mind. But
and I was the most upset at the moms because when I finally got accepted into UFC 2 travel and got to go to the show, I had my towel ready and I was ready to rock and roll. My dad said, no more blood cleaners. That's a done deal. The moms wouldn't allow that. So I was, man, oh man.
So who cleaned the blood after that?
No more cleaning of blood.
it was a referee maybe a little bit?
Yeah,
if needed, one of the refs.
Yeah, it's good. It adds color, you know.
At that point, for Rener and Ryron, at that point, did you guys know that this would be your life's calling, or did the UFC help develop you into the men that you are today? In other words, did you already know that this is what you would devote your life to before UFC 1 came about?
Yeah, I think
I did.
I think even before the UFC, we were already so influenced by our father and our grandfather and our uncles that with UFC or no UFC, we would still be very much, just about jiu-jitsu and about self-defense and, helping people.
I think the UFC was a minor transition from us from the garage to pay-per-view television globally. I mean, it was literally the same exact thing. Nothing was new about that other than more people were watching it. But we had seen that since the beginning. I mean, there was no life without jiu-jitsu. And to act like, we had a choice in the matter is an illusion. You know what I'm saying?
They were conceived for this.
This is what they were born to do.
Yeah, there really is no choice. And I think that we can't really effectively go back and talk about UFC 1 unless we recognize some of the kind of the ancillary benefits and effects and kind of aftershock of what happened there. And to really, I think a lot of people don't really know, what that caused, and I think one of the most significant ones was the U.S. Army, who soon after UFC 1 approached my father and Royce and requested their assistance in developing a program that would prepare soldiers for hand-to-hand combat in 1 week, in 40 hours of training. So the Army's saying, hey, we saw what happened in the cage. We would like you guys to help us do something to where a soldier who has no hand-to-hand combat experience can learn how to be a fighter in 1 week, because that's how the Army does things, right? 1 week of jump school, shooting, this, that, then they send them off to war. So I think that's crazy that the Army recognized that if the little guy can do it in the octagon, if Royce could do it against those giants, man, then definitely men and women, 18, 19, 20, 21, whether they've ever been in a fight or not, whether they've ever done a combat sport or any kind, not combat sport, any kind of athletic activity, they need to be taught how to defend themselves if the guns are dropped so they have that confidence. And for them to believe in the Gracie family because of what they saw in the UFC, it was remarkable. And now to see the effect of that, they've essentially, over the years since then, they've entirely restructured the U.S. Army hand-to-hand combat program and essentially written the Modern Army Combatives Manual based on the techniques that, the family has taught them since 1993, 1994. All soldiers now, it's part of their basic training. It's unbelievable. And for me, I don't know about for other people, but that is like one of the biggest kind of testaments, number one, to the effectiveness of jiu-jitsu, and number two, to the impact of what the UFC has done for the world and for our country.
Rorion, when did you leave the UFC?
95.
Why?
Because when Royce fought Dan Severn on UFC 4, we had actually the first UFC 1, 2, and 3, we had a 2-hour window for pay-per-view transmission. And when Royce fought UFC 4, Dan Severn, the live event went for 2 hours and 3 minutes, which means that at 2 hours exactly, the transmission was interrupted. And everybody who was at home along the world who had paid the money to see the fight did not see the last 3 minutes of the event. So it was the biggest mishap in pay-per-view history. Only who was people that were live in the arena saw the fight. Everybody else, the fight went blank. And then we had to, replay the show again, refund a lot of people and all kinds of stuff. But that caused a major confusion within the pay-per-view community because it was, like I said, the biggest mishap of all time. As a result of that, my pay-per-view partners, the guys at Semaphore, said, Rorion, a lot of people got fired as a result of this mishap, and we can't let it happen again. So we have to put time limits on the fights. We can no longer let the fight go with no time limit as it was until UFC 3. And we have to put rounds now, because rounds we can plan for a television show. We can calculate how much time the whole thing is going to last, much like a boxing event.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him that if you put time on the event, if you implement time limits, you would change the psychology of the fight, making the fighters now have the element of the clock to be, used for them. You can be very aggressive on the first round, chill on the second round, and depending on how many points you scored, you can be aggressive or less aggressive on the third round. You can start using the clock, especially because once you put time limits, you automatically have to bring in with that, you have to bring judges, because in case nobody wins, the judges determine who was who won the fight, who threw more punches, who threw more kicks. In other words, there's several elements would come into play if that's the case. You have to put weight class now. You can't let the guy be the little guy fighting the big guy, because in a 5-minute round would be too much of an advantage for the big guy fighting against a smaller person. So all these variables would impact the result of a real fight. And for me, from the very beginning, as a fight director I mentioned to you, the most important thing was let the two guys walk in, lock the door, one guy walks out. Let them do anything and everything they want. No restriction whatsoever. With the rules, you have to put time limits, judges, rules, regulations, and all these things would impact the fight. And I decided not to be involved anymore, because those things would take away from the real fight, which was the original concept of the UFC. Imagine if there's two guys fighting and one gets the other one in a perfect choke, and the bell rings, you have to stop because the bell rung. In a real fight, that would not happen. The guy who has the other one in the choke would defeat the opponent, and the fight would be the end of that. And now you see a fight interrupted, and when the guy comes back, knowing that your opponent isn't good in applying chokes, all he does is run away the whole time, scores a couple of points, and turns out to be the victor, even though he could have lost in a choke, a few seconds before. So I didn't like that concept, and I decided to sell out my part in the company, and I don't regret it at all, so that you know. I'm very confident with that, with my decision. And even though, today the show is a success as it is, I was not doing that because I had the idea of just making money with it. It was a philosophical approach to demonstrate the effectiveness of the best fighter, and jiu-jitsu has proven itself over and over. Have
you ever considered putting together another promotion that has those rules as you just mentioned them?
No, been there. I fought that war before. My goal is another one. My goal now is to teach people how to eat right and share the Gracie diet concept with the rest of the world. It's a much bigger, it's a much more challenging fight for me these days.
Where can people learn more about? Go ahead. Sorry.
GracieDiet.com. Everything, videos, tutorials, food combination guidelines. Basically, if you want to be 60 years old and look, talk, fight, and act like him, go to GracieDiet.com. It's all good. I'm already there. It's already my homepage on my website browser. Now, we can't talk about the UFC and his phase in the UFC without showing gratitude for the current phase that it's in, because my dad had a very specific purpose in creating that, right? It was, like you say, an infomercial for jiu-jitsu. The truth is, it's not a nice word. Infomercial has a negative connotation, but the truth is that's what it was.
The U.S. Army bought it.
Yeah, the U.S. Army bought it. All professional fighters bought the product. We bought the product. Everyone who's a little person who wants to defeat a big person is buying the product all over the world, because it's the only one that promises that level of success for a weaker individual, unlike every other martial art. It served its purpose, and that was incredible. But we've seen, after my dad exited the UFC, if you remember, it was a very dark days for the UFC. It crashed. There was Senator John McCain, different politicians fighting against it, and it was near death when the Zuffa organization bought it, and the Fertitta brothers bought it and came back up with Dana White and the rest of the team, and they essentially revived something that was amazing, but close to death. And what they've been able to do with it from that point until now is nothing short of ingenious and remarkable, because it was something, and at the something that it wasn't for any reason good enough. For whatever reason, it wasn't good enough for the American public. It was too violent, it was too this, it was too that. And because of that, the window was closing and it was gonna die. And at that point, the people who saw UFCs 1 through 5 would have been, oh, this is amazing. We remember the Hoist days, but they wouldn't have had a chance to enjoy it like they are today. So to see that they've been able to make it a sport, and even though that's not in alignment with my father's original beliefs, the fact that they did that and have catapulted it into this global entertainment spectacle that everyone loves watching, and now jiu-jitsu is being used by everyone in there, it still gives, you know, the art that we care most about and we think is most universally applicable, an exposure and a platform to be seen globally, which no one can deny we're benefiting from, every jiu-jitsu fighter benefits from, even though it's not jiu-jitsu versus karate, it's jiu-jitsu versus jiu-jitsu in many cases, along with taekwondo, kickboxing, wrestling. But the fact that they're fighting each other with jiu-jitsu still is a display of the beauty of the art we are so passionate about. And we're incredibly grateful for what that organization has become and done. And we're proud that we have been able to now work back with them and partner with the UFC in doing these Gracie breakdowns in an attempt to educate, you know, the MMA fans out there about what's actually going on in the octagon. So it's very fascinating how it's come full circle. And now, as long as the UFC exists and continues to grow, people will fall in love with jiu-jitsu. And our job is just to make sure that they go from watching it, get off the couch, go to their computer, go to GracieUniversity.com, and actually do it. Because if you're just watching the UFC and you're screaming at the television screen, I can tell you 100% you're not benefiting from the UFC in the highest regard.
And even before doing it, is just understanding it,
right,
and appreciating the beauty of it. Because they might not jump in and do it right away, but some people watch the UFC today and they're a little bit confused and, you know, unaware of what's happening on the ground, and they might even, you know, not want to watch fights that are people grappling.
Yeah, and the problem is jiu-jitsu's association in the UFC today, for a lot of people who don't know better, jiu-jitsu is, you know, Brock Lesnar and Frank Mir, you know, getting punched in the face. And they look at that and they say, man, I want nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
Where our job now is to say, look, in this rough situation here, there's a diamond that is fully applicable, universally effective, and life-changing of an incredible journey for anyone who embarks on it. It's not getting punched in the face or slammed into a cage. You can learn this. If you're a kid, you can be bully-proof. If you're a woman, you can learn to defend yourself against sexual assault. If you're a man, you can build more confidence to execute your job and protect your family in a safe, friendly, cooperative way without getting hurt. The number one thing we get, people walk in, they sit down in our spectator area, and they're watching a jiu-jitsu class, and they're like looking around like, when does the fighting begin? When does the bloody begin? When do people start getting punched in the face? Because I want to stay far away from that. They don't realize that jiu-jitsu, this gentle art, is much, much more than that and can be practiced in such a safe way. That's why the people who are in it for the lifelong journey until they're 95. And the people who aren't in it, you know, are just driving by our building every single day, watching, looking, respecting, but they don't come in. It's fascinating.
And if you talk to most professional fighters today, most UFC fighters, they're gonna say, man, we do jiu-jitsu because it's the safest for us.
Right.
Like, it's gonna keep us healthier when we're 50 years old, keep us fighting longer. So that is a perfect testimonial to how safe jiu-jitsu is, even practiced here or in any school in the world.
So that's our current battle and journey.
That is unbelievable. I want to end on this, and thank you so much for the time, guys. Just seeing this picture of the father and his two sons here is very heartwarming, and the man himself on the T-shirt there with that amazing mustache. I want to ask you, Rorion. I mean, to see 19 years after the UFC was born, to see your two sons here in front of you, and I could sort of try to relate to this because I became a father recently. My son is 6 months old, and he is the greatest thing, and I'm so proud of him. And I can't imagine him being the age of your two sons here. To see them, you know, doing what they're doing with the Gracie name and being on UFC television with the videos and teaching people of all kinds of shapes and sizes, men, women, child. What's it like for a father? 19 years after you were doing it for so long in the garage and everything, just put us into your mind and how you view your sons right now doing such amazing work and being these celebrities that they are in the MMA world.
Well, it's the dream of every father, you know, to have a son like this. I happen to have 10 kids. Hiro and Hen are the oldest ones, as you know, carrying on the flag here at the Gracie Academy at the highest level. I could ask for any more than that. The guys are extremely dedicated. My dreams of them committing to the cause were were fulfilled to the max. So, you know, how happy can one be and how proud can one be? I don't know if you can put that in words. I mean, it just goes beyond anything. These guys are too much, you know.
They are too much. They're unbelievable. You guys are doing fantastic work. And later on in the show, we are giving away a 12-disc set from the Gracie Academy, right? Rener, you have been kind enough to hook us up. Tell us what this is. What are people getting here? What's on the line?
Yeah. Gracie Combatives is our official white to blue belt curriculum in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. In fact, the Gracie Combatives program was derived from the program we created for the Army in 1994, in the sense that it's comprised of the 36 techniques that you absolutely must know to win in a street fight situation against a larger, more athletic opponent. It's structured so you can go through it from home. Lesson 1 builds into lesson 2. Lesson 3 builds off lesson 1 and 2. Lesson 4, so it's designed for no experience. Wherever you live in the whole world, you go through the techniques in order. 36 lessons, several months of dedicated training, and once you're done, we also include here the Blue Belt Qualification Test, which is the actual test live students here have to take to earn their Blue Belt in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. If you perfect these techniques from home, you get the 13th DVD, you perfect the test, you record yourself going through the techniques exactly as we demonstrate, and if your performance, a 25-minute test of all the techniques individually and in combination, if your performance meets Gracie Academy standards, we send you your Blue Belt in the mail. In other words, we watch it from here because you upload it online through GracieUniversity.com, and we can watch your performance. And if you make a mistake, we watch it, the instructors watch it, and we give you a time code and a specific deduction so you know exactly if you grabbed the wrist correctly or incorrectly at 2:32 in video number 2, your wrist grab was wrong, we'll let you know. So we have the feedback mechanism. You can learn from anywhere in the world. GracieUniversity.com, you can watch the first 3 lessons for free. So you log on, you check it out without any intimidation of going to a school, without getting punched in the face, without getting made fun of, without any of that.
Now, this all sounds great, but I'm telling you right now, more than half the world is thinking you can't learn from DVDs. You can't really learn. But if there's one thing I know for sure is I've traveled the world doing seminars and testing people who I've never met and who have only trained in their garages. And not only do they pass, but they pass with like amazing scores. Because the details and how clear it is and how many cameras is a whole different level. So please, somebody win this and say, you're crazy. This sucks.
Yes.
Or say, this stuff is amazing. Do one or the other, but give me a response.
And for those of you who don't win the DVD giveaway, go online to GracieUniversity.com today. The first 3 lessons are free. It's free to sign up. If you watch those first 3 lessons and they aren't the most amazing jiu-jitsu instructional lessons, no, better yet, let me go one step deeper. If they aren't the most amazing instructional you've ever received in any subject, not only jiu-jitsu, ping pong, pool, whatever you can name it, basketball, if it's not the best lesson you ever had in your life in any subject, you can choke Hidon out for free.
You can come to the academy and throw a brick at our front door.
Deal. It is a deal. Now, final thing before we let you go, tell us about the Movember campaign one more time. Where can people follow, donate? Tell us about what you're doing with the mustaches and this great cause.
Absolutely, yeah. The Movember organization, we've partnered with them. Roots of Fight, which is the incredible clothing company that we partner with to make dope shirts like this. They created a network, and in the Roots of Fight network, we have a team, a Gracie Academy team with students of ours from all over the world. So all you have to do is go to Movember.com and then search Team Gracie Academy. You can either donate to one of us to keep growing our mustaches, or you can donate to the team as a whole, or if you want to go all the way with it, join the team, grow your mustache, and take pride in it. Even though it looks like a little, dirt mustache over here at first, you have to be proud. And that's where the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu comes into play, because the confidence in defending yourself when people make fun of your mustache is critical. And you have to be able to hold strong no matter what. But Movember.com, look up the Gracie Academy team. Thanks for Jesse at Roots of Fight for setting that up. And we're there with Shannon Lee. We're there with a lot of other people have made teams as well. Snoop Dogg is joining. A lot of people are going for it, and it's a really cool thing, a really good cause to help raise awareness and funds for prostate cancer.
Machitas too. Machitas in it.
Everyone, you gotta have a mustache. You're not keeping it real.
Guys, congratulations! Happy anniversary! It has been. I keep saying honor. I don't know what else I can say, but this is a huge honor for us to have all of you here. Rorion, thank you so much. I know you're very busy. This really means a lot to us. Rener, always a pleasure. Happy birthday to you on Saturday. All the best. And Ryron, great to see you again. You guys are doing such fantastic work, and it was so great to have all of you on the show here today.
Thanks, Ariel, and let me know who to send this to. The winner, however you guys decide that, I'll send it out today.
We will do that. Thank you so much, guys. All the best.
Thanks. Yeah.
There they are. Rorion Gracie, Rener Gracie, Ryron Gracie. I wasn't expecting Rorion to be on the show, and I mean, it wouldn't have. I'm not really sure what to say at this point. I have this show to me is such a source of pride. We've been doing it since June of 2009. It wasn't supposed to be what it is. We weren't supposed to go 3 hours. This may be our proudest moment yet on the show, to look back at the history of the UFC, to have, Rorion Gracie, from Art Davie to Kathy Long to Campbell McLaren to Royce Gracie himself, to have someone like Dave Meltzer on the show. I'm not even sure what to say. I am sweating. I am tired. I am emotionally drained. This has been so much fun, and I hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope, and by the way, I'm not done yet. I'm just putting a little cap on this, and I hope that if you know someone out there that would enjoy this, an old fan, maybe a new fan, please let them know about what transpired here today, because this was pretty incredible to get this group of people here together for one day on the 19th anniversary of the UFC. I can't thank them enough.